Imagine sleeping over at Youngboy's crib and not being fed anything for over 48 hours. Well, that's the type of fear YB puts in these dudes' hearts.
He hungry? Why are you hungry for? Ain't it food to eat?
It is, but it's just like come around trying to get a few dollars, acting like they want to work, but really scared of YB.
Scared
A
of?
lot of scared of YB, bro.
Sit back, relax, cause today we're gonna be exposing the real story about why people are genuinely scared of NBA Youngboy, and I'm talking about people who are supposed to be close to him. This ain't about his reputation in the streets or his music. This is about his actual personality and the energy he gives off that makes grown men scared to even ask for food when they hungry. No cap. By the time I'm done telling you this story, you're gonna understand why even his homies walk on eggshells around this dude. Understanding Youngboy's intimidating presence. First, let me paint the picture for you, gang. NBA Youngboy ain't just some regular rapper who talks tough in his songs. This shorty got an aura that makes people uncomfortable even when he's trying to be cool. We talking about a dude who's been through so much trauma and violence that his default setting is intensity. And that type of energy is something you can feel the moment you walk in the room with him. When you go through that level of trauma and come out on top, it changes something fundamental about your energy. You develop this hypervigilance, this readiness for conflict, this ability to switch from calm to dangerous in seconds. And people can sense that shit even when you're just sitting there playing video games. The psychology behind this is deep, fam. When someone's been in survival mode for years, their nervous system stays activated even in safe situations. Youngboy might be chilling at home, but his brain is still scanning for threats, still ready to react, still operating like he's in the middle of a war zone. And that energy is contagious. It makes everyone around him feel like they gotta be on high alert too. Why trauma creates intimidating energy. Let me break down what's really happening with Youngboy's personality, because this type shit affects way more people than just him. When you survive multiple attempts on your life, when you've had to make life or death decisions as a teenager, when you've seen homies get killed and had to keep moving, that changes your brain chemistry permanently. Youngboy's been in situations where showing weakness could literally get you killed. So his brain learned to project strength and danger at all times, even in situations where it's not necessary. It's like having a security system that's stuck on maximum alert. It might keep you safe, but it also makes everyone around you nervous as hell. The crazy part is, Youngboy probably doesn't even realize how intimidating his presence is. To him, he's just being normal. But to everyone else, they're dealing with someone who's survived things they can't even imagine. And that survival energy is something you can feel in your bones when you're around him. This is why people who work with Youngboy, people who hang around him, even people who are supposed to be his friends, they all got this underlying tension when they're in his presence. It's not that he's necessarily threatening them directly. It's that his whole energy screams, "I've been through hell and I'm ready for whatever comes next." When fear meets hunger. Now let me tell you about this wild story that really shows you how scared people are of Youngboy, even over the most basic shit. His close friend, Chopper Boy, was telling this story about how somebody was staying at Youngboy's house, and this dude was literally scared to tell Youngboy that he was hungry. Think about that for a second, gang. We talking about a grown man who was too scared to say, "Yo, I'm hungry," to someone who was supposed to be his friend. That's not normal fear. That's the type of fear you have when you genuinely don't know how someone's gonna react to the smallest things. According to Chopper Boy, this dude went 2 whole days without eating because he was too scared to ask Youngboy for food. 2 days. This man was starving himself because he didn't want to risk setting Youngboy off or seeming like he was asking for too much. That tells you everything you need to know about the type of energy Youngboy puts out even in his own house. But here's where it gets really crazy. When Youngboy found out what happened, he was genuinely confused and frustrated. He was like, "Why you ain't just tell me you was hungry? You could have asked me for food, asked the chef, asked anybody." But the fact that this dude was too scared to even try shows you how Youngboy's presence affects people. Let me explain why this hunger situation is so telling about Youngboy's personality. When someone is too scared to express basic human needs around you, that means your energy is so intense that people would rather suffer than risk your reaction. That's not regular intimidation, that's psychological dominance. The dude who was scared to ask for food wasn't worried about Youngboy saying no. He was worried about how Youngboy might react to being asked. Maybe he'd seen Youngboy flip out over small things before, Maybe he'd witnessed that switch from calm to dangerous that Youngboy is capable of. Maybe he just felt that underlying tension that everyone talks about when they're around him. What makes this even more psychological is that Youngboy probably genuinely wanted to take care of his guest. But his energy was so intimidating that the dude chose to starve rather than risk asking for help. That's the type of fear that comes from being around someone who's unpredictable. Youngboy's reaction when he found out, being confused and frustrated, shows that he doesn't fully understand how his presence affects people. In his mind, he was being a good host, providing a place to stay, and he would have been happy to feed his guest, but his energy was so intense that it created fear where none was intended. The snake incident, when accidents meet anxiety. But that's just the beginning though. Let me tell you about this other incident that really shows you how people react around Youngboy. There was this cameraman who was filming at Youngboy's house, and this dude accidentally stepped on Youngboy's expensive pet snake and killed it. Yo, can you imagine the terror this cameraman must have felt in that moment? He just killed Youngboy's pet. Not just any pet, but an expensive snake that Youngboy probably cared about. Everyone in the room probably thought this dude was about to get his ass beat or worse. According to people who were there, the whole room went silent. Everyone was looking at Youngboy, waiting to see how he was gonna react. The cameraman was probably thinking his life was over. Everyone else was probably ready to run or duck for cover. That's the type of tension that exists around Youngboy. Even accidents feel like they could turn into life-threatening situations. But here's what's crazy about this story. When the cameraman apologized, Youngboy was actually cool about it. He didn't flip out, didn't get violent, didn't even really get that mad. He basically said it was an accident and told everyone to get back to what they were doing. Just like that, the tension was gone and everything went back to normal. The contradiction, reasonable reactions, unreasonable fear. This snake incident reveals something really important about Youngboy's personality. He's actually more reasonable than people expect him to be. When the cameraman apologized sincerely, Youngboy recognized it was an accident and moved on. That's actually pretty mature and understanding behavior. But the fact that everyone in the room was terrified shows you how Youngboy's reputation and energy precede him. People expect him to explode over small things because they've probably seen him explode before, or they've heard stories, or they just feel that dangerous energy he carries around. This creates this weird dynamic where Youngboy might actually be trying to be cool and reasonable, but everyone around him is operating from a place of fear. They're so worried about setting him off that they can't even act natural around him. And that probably frustrates Youngboy too, because he's trying to have normal relationships, but everyone's treating him like a ticking time bomb. The psychology here is fascinating. Youngboy's past actions and energy have created this reputation where people expect the worst from him, even when he's not actually being threatening. So everyone's walking on eggshells, which probably makes Youngboy feel isolated and misunderstood, which might actually make him more likely to lash out in the future. The energy that creates fear. Let me break down what it is about Youngboy that makes people so scared of him, because it's not just his reputation, it's something deeper. When you've been through the type of trauma Youngboy has experienced, when you've had to be ready for violence at any moment, when you've survived multiple attempts on your life, that creates a certain type of energy that people can feel. Youngboy carries himself like someone who's always ready for war. His posture, his facial expressions, the way he looks at people, the way he moves, everything about his body language says, "I'm not the one to play with." And that's not an act or a persona. That's genuine survival instinct that's been hardwired into his nervous system. People who've been around Youngboy describe this feeling like the air gets thicker when he walks in the room. Conversations get quieter, people start watching their words, everyone becomes more aware of their movements and actions. That's not because Youngboy is necessarily doing anything threatening, it's because his presence carries the weight of everything he's been through. The crazy part is, Youngboy might not even be in a bad mood or thinking about anything violent. He could be in a perfectly good mood, ready to chill and have fun. But his default energy is so intense that people can't relax around him. They're always waiting for that switch to flip, always ready for things to go left. The survival instinct that never turns off. Here's what people don't understand about Youngboy's psychology. When you've survived the type of situations he's been through, your brain literally rewires itself to always be ready for danger. It's called hypervigilance, and it's a trauma response that keeps you alive in dangerous situations, but makes normal social interactions really difficult. Youngboy's brain is constantly scanning for threats, constantly ready to react, constantly operating like he's still in those life or death situations from his past. So even when he's at home, even when he's around friends, even when he's trying to relax, part of his brain is still in survival mode. This creates this energy that people can sense even when they can't explain it. They feel like they're around someone who could snap at any moment, someone who's always ready for conflict, someone who's been through things they can't even imagine. And that feeling makes them nervous, makes them careful, makes them scared. The tragedy is that this survival instinct that kept Youngboy alive in the streets is now making it hard for him to have normal relationships. People can't just be themselves around him because they're too busy trying not to set him off. And Youngboy probably feels that distance, that fear, that tension, which probably makes him feel even more isolated. The unpredictability factor. What makes Youngboy especially intimidating is his unpredictability. People who know him say you never know which version of him you're gonna get. One minute he might be cool, laughing, playing video games, acting like a regular young dude. The next minute, something small might set him off and he's ready to go to war. This unpredictability is probably a result of his trauma and the constant stress he's under. When you're dealing with legal issues, industry politics, family drama, and street beef all at the same time, your emotional regulation gets thrown off. Small things can feel like big things when you're already operating at maximum stress levels. For the people around him, this unpredictability creates constant anxiety. They never know what's going to trigger him, never know when his mood might shift, never know when something innocent might turn into a problem. So they end up walking on eggshells, trying to read his energy, trying to stay out of his way when he seems off. The hunger story and the snake incident both show this unpredictability. In both cases, people expected the worst from Youngboy, but he actually reacted reasonably. But the fact that everyone was so scared shows that they've probably seen him react unreasonably to other situations, or they've heard stories that made them expect explosive reactions. The isolation that comes with fear. Here's the real tragedy of Youngboy's intimidating presence. It's making him more isolated than he probably wants to be. When people are scared of you, they can't be genuine around you. They can't relax, can't be themselves, can't form real connections with you. Youngboy probably craves normal human interaction, just like anyone else. He probably wants friends who can joke around with him, challenge him, be real with him. But when everyone's scared of setting him off, those types of relationships become impossible. This creates a vicious cycle. Youngboy feels isolated because people are scared of him, which makes him more frustrated and potentially more volatile, which makes people even more scared of him. It's like being trapped in a reputation that you can't escape, even when you're trying to be better. The people who stay in Youngboy's circle are probably either people who aren't scared of him, which is rare, or people who are willing to deal with the fear because of the benefits, money, status, protection. But neither of those dynamics creates genuine friendship or connection. The street mentality in civilian spaces. Part of what makes Youngboy so intimidating is that he brings street mentality into civilian spaces. In the streets, you have to be ready for anything at any time. You have to project strength. You have to be willing to escalate situations. You have to make people think twice before they try you. But when you bring that same energy into your house, into business meetings, into casual social situations, it creates this atmosphere of tension and fear. People who aren't from that world don't know how to navigate around that type of energy. Youngboy probably doesn't even realize he's doing it. To him, being alert and projecting strength is just normal behavior. But to everyone else, it feels like being around someone who's always ready for war, even when there's no war to fight. This is why the hunger story is so telling. The dude who was scared to ask for food was probably picking up on Youngboy's street energy and interpreting it as a threat, even though Youngboy wasn't actually threatening him. The energy was just so intense that it created fear where none was intended. The loyalty test through fear. Here's something else that's interesting about Youngboy's intimidating presence. It might actually serve as a loyalty test. The people who stick around despite being scared, the people who learn to navigate his energy, the people who prove they're not gonna run when things get intense, those are the people who earn his trust. In Youngboy's world, loyalty is everything. And one way to test loyalty is to see who's willing to deal with your worst moments, your most intense energy, your most unpredictable moods. The people who are scared but stay anyway might actually be more valuable to him than people who aren't scared at all. This could explain why Youngboy keeps people around even when they're clearly terrified of him. Their fear might actually prove their loyalty. They're scared, but they're still there, still trying to maintain the relationship, still willing to deal with his energy because they value the connection. But this dynamic is also unhealthy because it's based on fear rather than genuine respect and affection. Real loyalty should come from love and respect, not from being too scared to leave. The media amplification of fear. Part of why people are so scared of Youngboy is because of how the media portrays him. Every arrest, every legal issue, every street incident gets amplified and sensationalized. So by the time people meet him, they've already heard all these stories about how dangerous and unpredictable he is. This creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. People expect him to be scary, so they act scared around him, which probably frustrates him and makes him more likely to live up to their expectations. It's hard to be gentle and understanding when everyone's already treating you like a monster. The reality is probably more complex than the media portrayal. Youngboy is probably capable of both extreme violence and extreme kindness, depending on the situation and his mood. But the media only focuses on the violent side, so that's what people expect when they meet him. This media amplification also means that Youngboy's reputation precedes him everywhere he goes. People have already made up their minds about who he is before they even meet him, and that makes it almost impossible for him to have normal social interactions. The business implications of being feared. Being feared might actually help Youngboy in some business situations. In the music industry, which is full of sharks and people trying to take advantage of young artists, having a reputation for being dangerous can protect you from getting played. People might be less likely to try to cheat Youngboy, less likely to disrespect him, less likely to test his boundaries if they're genuinely scared of the consequences. In that sense, his intimidating presence might actually be a business asset, but it also creates problems. People might be too scared to give him honest feedback, too scared to challenge his ideas, too scared to tell him when he's making mistakes. And that can lead to bad business decisions and missed opportunities. The Hunger story shows this dynamic perfectly. The dude was too scared to ask for basic needs, which means he's definitely too scared to speak up about business issues or creative differences. And that type of fear-based relationship isn't good for anyone involved. The psychological toll on Youngboy. What people don't think about is how exhausting it must be for Youngboy to carry this intimidating energy all the time. Being constantly ready for conflict, constantly projecting strength, constantly dealing with people who are scared of you. That takes a psychological toll. Youngboy probably wants to relax sometimes, wants to let his guard down, wants to just be a regular young dude without all the intensity and fear. But his trauma and his circumstances make that almost impossible. He's trapped in this persona that keeps him safe but also keeps him isolated. The fact that he was confused when he found out about the Hunger situation shows that he doesn't always realize how his energy affects people. He probably thought he was being a good host, creating a comfortable environment, but his natural intensity was so strong that it created the opposite effect. This disconnect between his intentions and people's reactions probably happens a lot in his life. He might be trying to be friendly and welcoming, but people are too scared to receive it that way, and that has to be frustrating and lonely. The cycle of violence and fear. Youngboy's intimidating presence is also connected to the cycle of violence that he's been caught up in since he was young. When you're involved in street politics, when you have enemies, when people are literally trying to kill you, projecting fear becomes a survival mechanism. If people are scared of you, they're less likely to try you. If people think you're unpredictable and dangerous, they're more likely to leave you alone. In Youngboy's world, being feared might literally be the difference between life and death, but this same energy that protects him in dangerous situations makes normal relationships almost impossible. The people who could be genuine friends are too scared to get close, and the people who aren't scared might be dangerous themselves. This creates a situation where Youngboy is surrounded by people who either fear him or are potentially threats to him. There's no middle ground of normal, healthy relationships, and that has to be incredibly isolating and psychologically damaging. The final breakdown: understanding the fear. At the end of the day, people are scared of Youngboy because he represents something most people have never encountered. Someone who's genuinely been through life or death situations and carries that energy with him everywhere he goes. It's not an act, it's not a persona, it's genuine survival instinct that's been hardwired into his personality. The hunger story and the snake incident both show the same thing. People expect the worst from Youngboy, even when he's actually being reasonable. That expectation of violence, that constant tension, that fear of setting him off, that's what defines most people's interactions with him. But here's what's really sad about this whole dynamic. Youngboy is probably just as trapped by this fear as everyone else is. He can't have normal relationships, can't relax around people, can't be vulnerable or show weakness because everyone's expecting him to be this dangerous, unpredictable person. The people who are scared of him are missing out on potentially genuine connections with someone who's been through incredible experiences and survived things most people couldn't imagine. And Youngboy is missing out on the type of normal human relationships that everyone needs to be psychologically healthy. This is the real cost of street trauma and the cycle of violence. It doesn't just affect you in dangerous situations, it affects every relationship, every interaction, every moment of your life. Youngboy might have survived the streets, but he's still trapped by the psychological effects of everything he's been through. That's why people are scared of NBA Youngboy, fam. It's not just his reputation or his music. It's the genuine energy of someone who's been through hell and is still carrying that hell with him everywhere he goes. And until he finds a way to heal from that trauma, that fear is gonna follow him into every room he enters, every relationship he tries to build, every moment he tries to just be normal. Real recognize real, but trauma recognizes trauma too. And everyone around Youngboy can feel that trauma, even when they can't name it or understand it. That's the real reason for the fear. Not because he's necessarily dangerous, but because he's carrying the weight of experiences that most people can't even comprehend. And that type of weight creates an energy that's impossible to ignore. No cap. If you got this far, you're a real one. Make sure to like, comment, and hit the subscribe button.